On February 5, 2025, the Philippine House of Representatives voted to impeach Vice President Sara Duterte. The charges included alleged misuse of 612.5 million pesos in public and intelligence funds, unexplained wealth, and reportedly issuing threats against President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos, and House Speaker Martin Romualdez. The impeachment motion passed overwhelmingly, with 215 out of 306 lawmakers voting in favor, surpassing the required threshold. This marked a significant moment in Philippine history, as Duterte became the first sitting vice president to be formally impeached. In this episode of Asia Pacific, we unpack the context, key events, and ramifications of the impeachment proceedings against Vice President Sara Duterte. We'll be discussing what led to this unprecedented move, the arguments presented, and the potential implications for Philippine politics. So stick around as we delve into the details of this developing story. Duterte's road to impeachment. The impeachment proceedings against Vice President Duterte were the culmination of months of political tension and rivalry between her and the Marcos administration. In late January 2025, a lawmaker accused her of amassing wealth far beyond her known sources of income, citing her family's lavish lifestyle and the acquisition of high-end properties. Days later, another complaint surfaced alleging the misuse of intelligence funds, including the rental of luxury vehicles. Subsequently, several more complaints were filed, encompassing various allegations from unexplained wealth to attempts to influence government projects. However, none of these initial complaints reached the threshold for impeachment. The turning point came when the House Committee on Public Accounts endorsed a resolution directing the Ombudsman to investigate Vice President Duterte. In response, she delivered a public speech in her hometown, Davao City, which was perceived as defiant and confrontational. During the speech, she openly criticized the Marcos administration and alleged that President Marcos had requested her resignation before granting her husband a cabinet position, which she declined. She also claimed that she was being politically targeted and the complaints against her were baseless. Following this speech, the House leadership announced plans to impeach Vice President Duterte, and on February, they formally filed the articles of impeachment. The allegations included grave abuse of authority, betrayal of public trust, and culpable violation of the Constitution, particularly for allegedly threatening the president, his wife, and the House Speaker. The impeachment complaint garnered enough support to proceed to a vote on the matter. And ultimately, 215 lawmakers voted in favor of impeaching Duterte, sending the case to the Senate for trial. Senate response and legal maneuvers. After the House voted to impeach Vice President Duterte, the articles of impeachment were transmitted to the Senate, which has the power to try impeachment cases. However, instead of initiating a formal trial, the Senate opted to return the case to the House on June 10, 2025, citing a lack of sufficient grounds for impeachment. This move was based on technicalities surrounding the complaint and its supporting evidence. The Senate cited the absence of documentary or testimonial evidence to support the allegations, stating that the evidence provided was insufficient to justify opening a trial. Nevertheless, on June 23rd, Duterte, as legal counsel, filed a preemptive response known as an answer ad cautelum to the impeachment complaint, asserting that the impeachment was unconstitutional. Their arguments centered on the fact that this was the fourth complaint filed against Vice President Duterte within a single year, violating the constitutional rule that restricts each public official to one impeachment proceeding per year. This defense was supported by a group of lawmakers who echoed the same concern. They emphasized that multiple complaints had been filed to circumvent the one-year rule, rendering the current complaint inadmissible. Supreme Court decision and dismissal of the case. In response to the legal challenge, the Office of the Ombudsman conducted a preliminary investigation and submitted a report to the Supreme Court. The report concluded that there was no probable cause to indict Vice President Duterte based on the available evidence. Subsequently, the Supreme Court issued a decision declaring the impeachment complaint unconstitutional due to the one-year rule violation. The court held that allowing the complaint to proceed would violate Vice President Duterte's constitutional rights. On July 25, 2025, the Supreme Court of the Philippines issued a unanimous ruling declaring the impeachment complaint unconstitutional. The court stated that the multiple complaints filed in a short span of time breached the one-year rule, thereby invalidating the most recent filing. Consequently, the impeachment case was effectively thrown out, and no new complaint can be initiated against Duterte until after February 6, 2026. It's critical to note, however, that the ruling did not equate to an acquittal. The Supreme Court did not rule on the truth of the allegations, but merely addressed the legal flaws in the procedure. Duterte has consistently denied all accusations and described the impeachment as a politically motivated effort to discredit her. Wider political ramifications. The impeachment saga unfolded amid growing political tension between two powerful families, those of President Marcos and Vice President Duterte. While they once formed a united front under the Uniteam banner during the 2022 elections, by mid-2024, their alliance had unraveled, leading to open political warfare and public accusations on both sides. The impeachment proceedings were seen as a culmination of this political conflict, with both sides using every available tool to weaken the other. The Supreme Court's decision has significant implications for Philippine politics, particularly in light of the 2028 presidential election. Many viewed the impeachment as an attempt to disqualify Duterte from running for higher office. Now that the impeachment has been dismissed, she remains a viable candidate and a potential frontrunner for the presidency. However, the decision has also drawn criticism from those who believe it reinforces a culture of impunity among the political elite. Skeptics point out that a majority of the justices were appointed by Duterte's father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, who is himself facing international charges related to human rights abuses during his administration's anti-drug campaign. These critics argue that the Supreme Court has once again protected a member of the Duterte family, preventing them from facing justice for their alleged misdeeds. Conversely, supporters of the ruling contend that it merely upheld constitutional due process and legal protections against political harassment. They argue that the one-year rule exists to prevent public officials from being bombarded with frivolous impeachment complaints, and that in this case, it was correctly applied. The dismissal of the case does not exonerate Vice President Duterte, but rather allows her to defend herself against serious allegations without undue haste. To gain a deeper understanding of the case, it's essential to examine some of the key arguments and perspectives surrounding it. Firstly, the defense of Vice President Duterte highlights the importance of procedural safeguards in the impeachment process. Her lawyers argued that the one-year rule was designed to prevent repeated harassment of public officials through impeachment proceedings, and that in this instance, the rule was violated. Secondly, critics of the Supreme Court's decision contend that the ruling perpetuates a culture of impunity among the political elite, enabling them to evade accountability for their actions. They argue that the Supreme Court should have upheld the impeachment complaint despite the procedural issues and allowed the Senate to conduct a trial. Lastly, the decision has broader implications for Philippine politics, particularly in the context of the upcoming 2028 presidential election. The ruling clears the way for Vice President Duterte to run for president, positioning her as a formidable contender. As we conclude this episode, it's crucial to consider the broader implications of the Supreme Court's decision. The case raises important questions about the balance between political expediency and the rule of law. Additionally, the ruling has reignited discussions about reforms to the impeachment process, with many calling for stricter guidelines to prevent the misuse of impeachment powers for political gain. Thank you for watching this episode of Asia Pacific. If you found it informative and engaging, we invite you to show your support. Your support helps us continue producing quality content that explores the complexities of current affairs in the Asia-Pacific region. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, which promise to delve into more critical topics shaping our world. Until then, keep learning and stay curious.